Ethan, please. Don't marry her. I made a mistake. The words hit harder than the cold rain. She was standing in front of his truck, soaked, trembling, her mascara running down her cheeks like ink on wet paper. Grace Turner, once the woman he thought he'd spend his life with, was now a ghost of her former confidence, blocking his way on a night that was supposed to be the clean start of his new life. Ethan Miller stood still beneath the neon glow of Morton's Steakhouse, the reflection of red taillights rippling across the puddles at his boots. Inside, warm laughter and clinking glasses spilled through the door as his fiancée, Linda Hayes, waited for him. She had always hated being late, but tonight she had told him, "Take your time, Ethan. You deserve to breathe, before we celebrate." He hadn't expected that breath to feel like a storm. Rufus, his old rescue dog, stood beside him, his golden fur damp, ears pressed back. The dog's low growl broke the silence. Ethan's hand tightened on the leash. Rufus never growled without reason. There was something sharp in the air. Grace's perfume, sweet but mixed with another scent, cologne. Ethan noticed but said nothing. His silence was colder than the Tennessee rain. "You're just going to stand there?" she said, her voice shaking. "You're really going to marry her? You and I, we had something real." Ethan's eyes lifted, slow, deliberate. "Real?" he asked. "You left the moment things got difficult." She flinched, wiping her wet hair from her face. "I thought you'd never make it. I thought you'd waste your life fixing air conditioners for pocket change. I didn't know. Didn't know I'd succeed?" Ethan's tone was even, almost kind. "Or didn't know you'd fail." Grace's lips parted, but no words came. The rain fell harder, drumming on the hood of the truck. Rufus took a step forward, watching her with that strange intuition dogs carry, the kind that sees through human guilt. Inside the restaurant, Linda's silhouette passed by the window. She was laughing with someone, touching her necklace lightly, waiting for him to come inside. The golden light behind the glass made her look like home. "Please, Ethan," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. "Victor's gone. He wasn't who I thought he was. I made the wrong choice." Ethan looked past her toward the city lights blurred by rain. Wrong choice. That phrase lingered in his mind like an echo from another life. A year ago, those same words had been his silent prayer when she walked out of a diner, leaving him with a small velvet box and a check he could barely pay. But now everything was different. A year ago I would have given anything to hear her say that, he thought. Now I don't feel a thing. Grace took a hesitant step closer. "I know you hate me. But I still remember the way you looked at me that night at Cracker Barrel. You said love wasn't about money, it was about faith. I was a fool, Ethan. I didn't believe you. But now I do." Ethan stared at her, rain running down his jaw, eyes reflecting the soft neon of the restaurant sign. "Faith," he murmured, half to himself. "You talk about faith like it's a jacket you can put on when the weather changes." She winced. Rufus growled again. "You kept the dog," she said, trying to smile through her tears. "You always loved strays." "He's not a stray," Ethan said quietly. "He's loyal." The silence stretched, thick and wet, filled only by the patter of rain and the faint hum of traffic from the street. Ethan's mind drifted, uninvited memories rushing back. Grace laughing in the passenger seat of his old Toyota Tacoma, complaining about the heat because the air conditioner had died. Her red lipstick prints on a coffee cup. The smell of vanilla lotion after a long day. The same smell that now mixed with the stranger's cologne on her clothes. He could almost hear her old voice, saying, "When your business takes off, then we'll have it all." But what she really meant was, "When you make enough, I'll stay." His eyes dropped to her hands, no ring. Just chipped nail polish and shaking fingers clutching her purse. "He left you?" Ethan asked softly. Grace looked down. "He lost everything. The lawsuits, the money. He's ruined. And I don't know where to go." Ethan exhaled, a long, slow breath that steamed in the cool air. "You came here," he said, almost to himself. "You always come back when something breaks." "Don't say that," she pleaded. "You were always the kind one, Ethan. You helped people who couldn't even pay you. You can't just walk away from me." Ethan glanced toward the restaurant window again. Linda was looking out now, eyes gentle, patient. She knew him well enough not to interrupt. Grace followed his gaze and whispered, "Her? She'll never understand you like I did." Ethan shook his head. "No, Grace. She doesn't have to understand my struggle." She stood by it. For a moment, the wind caught her hair and sent droplets scattering like glass. Grace's voice turned bitter. "You think she loves you more because she stayed? Maybe she just doesn't know the other side of you, the one who couldn't pay bills, who dreamed too small. Ethan took a step forward, close enough that she could see the rain glistening on his lashes. I never dreamed small, he said quietly. I dreamed honest. There's a difference. Rufus whined softly, as if sensing the end of something. Ethan's shoulders relaxed. You should go home, Grace, he said finally. Before you catch cold. Home? She said. I don't have one. Ethan hesitated, the humanity in him wrestling with memory. But he'd learned something in the years since she left. Compassion doesn't mean returning to old wounds. It means closing them without hate. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his wallet, and slid out a worn business card. There's a shelter downtown, he said. Tell them I sent you. They'll help. She stared at the card, then at him, disbelief flickering in her eyes. You'd really do that for me? After everything? That's what decent people do, Ethan said simply. Even when it's not deserved. Grace's tears mixed with rain. She reached out, fingers trembling, but he stepped back. The headlights from a passing car washed over them in white light, and for a second she looked like the woman he used to love until the moment passed. He turned to Rufus, gave the leash a gentle tug. Come on, boy. The dog obeyed, tail low but steady. As Ethan opened the truck door, Grace's voice cracked one last time through the rain. Ethan. Do you ever think about what we could have been? He paused, hand on the door. I used to, he said. But then I realized what I was meant to be instead. He got in, started the engine. Rufus settled beside him, shaking off rainwater. Through the windshield, Grace stood motionless, clutching his card to her chest. Ethan looked ahead toward the restaurant entrance, where Linda waited. Her smile was small, calm, the kind that said she trusted him completely. He turned off the wipers for a moment and let the rain blur the world outside, softening its edges. When money fades, he thought, character remains. Maybe that's all that's ever mattered. He opened the truck door and stepped out into the downpour, heading toward the light. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the Nashville sky pale and washed clean. Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee in the small kitchen of his workshop, the scent of roasted beans blending with motor oil and metal. Rufus slept on a rug by the door, twitching occasionally in his dreams. The quiet hum of the heater filled the space. He should have felt relief after last night's encounter, but instead he felt something heavier, like the echo of a door closing inside him. He looked at the framed newspaper clipping pinned above his workbench. The Good Samaritan mechanic who keeps hearts warm. Below it, Linda's handwriting read. Proud of you. Always. He smiled faintly, but his thoughts drifted backward, to a time when things were smaller, tighter, and the word always still belonged to someone else. A year ago. He was sitting in a booth at a Cracker Barrel off the interstate, his palms sweating against the velvet box in his pocket. The waitress had just cleared their plates. Grace was scrolling through her phone, humming along to the country tune playing over the speakers. Ethan could still hear the clinking of mugs, the chatter of families, the smell of maple syrup and frying bacon. It had been Sunday morning, the day he decided to ask her to marry him. Grace, he'd said, his voice half hope, half prayer. She looked up, smiling distractedly. What's wrong? You look like you're about to tell me you wrecked the truck. He laughed nervously, then placed the small box on the table. Her laughter stopped. She opened it slowly. The ring wasn't large, a modest diamond, set in silver, but it was clean, simple, real. Ethan, she whispered, the smile fading. What is this? What does it look like? He said, trying to keep his voice light. It's a promise. I know I'm not rich, but... She interrupted with a dry laugh, not cruel, but cutting. You think I can walk around with a ring this small? Everyone will think you bought it at a pawn shop. It doesn't matter what they think, he said quickly. What matters is us. She leaned back, crossing her arms. You don't get it, Ethan. I grew up watching my mom count coupons and cry over bills. I can't live like that again. I need stability. I need money, he said quietly. No, she said, though her tone betrayed her. Security. He nodded slowly, closing the box. One day I'll give you both. Just have faith. Faith doesn't pay rent, she said, grabbing her purse. I'm sorry, Ethan. I can't do this. She stood and left the booth, heels clicking against the tile. He sat there for a long time, watching the rain begin to fall outside the window, the untouched pancakes cooling between them. That night, he drove back to his apartment, parked his old Toyota Tacoma outside, and sat in the dark. Rufus wasn't with him yet, just silence and the distant hum of trains. She's right, he'd thought bitterly. Dreams don't pay bills. But something inside him refused to let go of the idea that doing things the right way would matter someday. He reached into his wallet and slid the small receipt for the ring behind his driver's license. Keep it, he told himself. As proof you believed. The following week, Ethan made a decision. He took every dollar he had saved for their honeymoon fund and used it to buy a second-hand compressor and a box of tools. He painted a small sign. Miller Climate Services. Heating and cooling done right. He drove door to door, leaving flyers on porches, offering tune-ups at half price, free service for seniors. The work was hard sweat-soaked afternoons, long drives across county lines, but it filled the emptiness Grace left behind. When people thanked him, when an old woman hugged him after her heat came back on, it made something in him settle. One afternoon, while fixing a heater for Mr. Henry, a widower living on a military pension, Ethan's wrench slipped, scraping his knuckles. Blood welled up. Mr. Henry chuckled from his armchair. You okay, son? Ethan wiped his hand with a rag. Just rusty bolts. This thing's older than I am. That makes two of us, the old man said. You gonna charge me a fortune for this? You're a veteran, Ethan replied. I'm not charging you at all. Mr. Henry's eyes softened. You can't keep giving everything away. Can't take it with me, Ethan said with a shrug. The old man smiled. Your dad used to say the same thing. He worked on cars. Good man. Decent. Ethan paused. You knew my dad? Sure did. Helped him fix my Oldsmobile back in '97. He told me once. There's right, and there's easy. You don't get both. Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, he murmured. He was right about that. Mr. Henry leaned forward. Don't lose it, son. That decency. The world's short on it these days. Ethan nodded. He didn't know it yet, but that single line, don't lose it, would become his compass. By autumn, word of his kindness spread. Local radio stations mentioned the young mechanic with an old soul. One evening, a church volunteer named Linda Hayes called him after hearing about his work. We've got a busted unit at Street Marks, she said. Can you take a look? When he arrived, she was standing by the church kitchen, sleeves rolled up, serving soup to a line of people. Her hair was tied back, and she smiled without pretending. You must be Ethan, she said. Thank you for coming. Just doing my job, he said, setting down his toolbox. Well, around here, that means something. When he finished the repair, she handed him a bowl of stew. Eat? She said. You look like you skipped lunch and maybe dinner too. He chuckled. You're not wrong. They ate together on the church steps while the sun set behind the stained glass windows. You fix the air, she said softly. But you fix people too. You just don't notice. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw no judgment, just quiet belief. It felt foreign after Grace, but it also felt like peace. In the months that followed, Linda invited him to help with food drives, community cleanups, and Rufus, whom Ethan adopted from a rescue center she volunteered at, became their unofficial mascot. Dogs always know who to trust, Linda said the day Rufus curled up by Ethan's feet. People just take longer. Ethan laughed, but deep down, he knew it was true. On nights when business was slow, Ethan sat in his workshop listening to old country records his father used to love. The neon open sign flickered outside, the faint hum of the heater filling the silence. Sometimes he caught himself wondering where Grace was, what she was doing, but those thoughts no longer hurt. They felt like old photographs. Familiar, faded, safe to look at because they no longer bled. One evening, he found the velvet box again, tucked in the glove compartment of his truck. He opened it, staring at the small diamond glinting in the dim light. It wasn't much, he thought, but it was honest. He closed it, slid it back into place. Outside, Rufus barked at something unseen, a squirrel or maybe just the wind. Ethan smiled. Come on, boy, he said. We've got another job tomorrow. The dog wagged his tail, and Ethan turned off the lights, unaware that the past he'd buried would soon come knocking again, wearing the same perfume he'd tried to forget. By spring, Nashville had shaken off the chill of winter, and Ethan's small workshop buzzed with new life. The Miller Climate Services sign, once hand-painted and crooked, now gleamed in blue letters above the garage. The phone rang more often, and the name Ethan Miller had started to mean something in town. Not rich, not flashy, but honest. People liked that. Rufus lay on an old rug near the door, tail flicking every time the bell chimed. Linda's laughter often filled the space. She came by after work at the church to help with paperwork or just to bring him coffee. She had a way of turning silence into warmth without even trying. One evening, as Ethan tightened the bolts on a compressor, she leaned against the workbench, sipping her drink. You've got quite the reputation now, she said. The Tennessean called again. They want another story about your program. Ethan wiped his hands. They already did one. That's plenty. It's good press. People like knowing someone still believes in doing the right thing. He smiled. If they all start believing it, I'll be out of a job. Linda chuckled. You'd find another way to help. You always do. Her faith in him was steady. The kind of quiet belief that didn't need grand gestures. He admired that. Outside, the sun melted into gold, stretching long shadows over the workshop floor. He turned off the wrench, the hum fading. You ever think, he said, that maybe people notice goodness only when they've lost it? She looked at him. You mean Grace? He froze for half a second, surprised she'd said the name. I heard bits, she added gently. Not details. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah. I suppose that's what I meant. Linda didn't pry. She never did. She just said, sometimes people like her teach us who we don't want to become, and went back to folding invoices. A few weeks later, the Heat for Heroes program took off. Ethan and a small crew of volunteers repaired air systems for senior citizens, veterans, and families on fixed incomes. Local businesses began donating parts. Churches joined in. Every time he walked into a house and saw relief in someone's eyes when the heat kicked back on, something in him settled deeper, stronger. It wasn't fame, but purpose, and for a man who'd lost both love and pride, it felt like redemption. The phone rang one afternoon, and Linda answered from the front desk. Miller Climate Services, she said brightly. Then her voice dropped. Yes, he's here. She handed the receiver to Ethan, brow furrowed. It's the Tennessean again. Ethan took the call. The editor explained that the city council wanted to honor him at a charity gala for community work. He hesitated. A gala? Big crowd, good exposure, the editor said. And donors. You could expand your program. Ethan glanced at Linda, who was feeding Rufus a treat. All right, he said finally. I'll go. The night of the gala arrived humid and bright with city lights. The event hall downtown was full of chatter, champagne, and people wearing more money than he made in a month. Ethan adjusted his tie awkwardly, feeling out of place. Linda looked elegant but simple in a navy dress. Her smile the calmest thing in the room. You look nervous. She teased. I fix air conditioners, he murmured. Not crowds. Same principle, she said. You just have to keep them from overheating. He laughed, tension easing. Then he heard a voice smooth, familiar, and cold. Well, if it isn't Ethan Miller, the mechanic who became a folk hero. He turned. Victor Sanders stood there, hand resting possessively on the small of Grace Turner's back. She wore a red dress, her hair curled to perfection, but her eyes, those used to hold fire, looked restless. Ethan's chest tightened for a second, then steadied. Victor, he said evenly. Grace. Ethan, she replied, smiling too brightly. I read about your work. It's noble. That's one word for it, Victor said with a smirk. Still fixing vents and boilers? I admire persistence, if not ambition. Linda stepped forward, her voice calm. Doing honest work doesn't make you small, Mr. Sanders. Victor chuckled, clearly amused. And you are? Linda Hayes, she said. I run community programs at Street Marks. Victor's eyes swept over her, assessing. Ah, church folk. That explains the sermon. Ethan clenched his jaw but forced a polite smile. It was nice seeing you both. He guided Linda toward the buffet, leaving them behind. You handled that well, she whispered. He's not worth the energy, Ethan replied. Yet behind his calm, something old stirred pain mixed with pity. Grace's laughter drifted from across the room, but it sounded forced, brittle. Rufus wasn't there, but Ethan could almost imagine the dog's growl in the back of his mind. The evening dragged on. He gave a short speech about community work, thanked donors, and smiled for photos. He felt Linda's hand slip into his under the table, a quiet anchor. Still, as he looked out at the crowd, his eyes caught Grace's. For a second, she looked like she might cry. He looked away first. Later, as the gala ended, he stepped outside for air. The street lamps glowed against a thin mist. He loosened his tie, the night wind carrying the smell of jasmine from a nearby garden. You handled that better than most men would, a voice said behind him. Grace. She stepped out of the shadows, heels clicking. Victor's drunk, she said quickly. He's been impossible lately. I just needed a moment. Ethan sighed. Grace. Whatever trouble you're in, it's not mine to fix. I'm not asking for that, she said. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For how I treated you. For not believing. He looked at her, searching for sincerity. Why now? Because I see what you've become, she said. You proved me wrong. I wasn't trying to, he replied. I was just trying not to become bitter. She smiled sadly. You were always better than me. No, he said. Just lucky enough to have people who believed in me. Her eyes softened. Linda, you mean? Among others. Grace's gaze dropped. I thought money would keep me safe. Turns out, it just made me afraid. Ethan said nothing. The silence between them stretched, heavy but not cruel. I should go, she said finally. Victor will wonder. Take care of yourself, Grace. You too, Ethan. She turned and walked away, her perfume lingering soft, nostalgic, dangerous. He watched until the night swallowed her silhouette, then whispered to himself. Some lessons cost too much to learn twice. When he returned inside, Linda was helping the organizers pack up. Everything okay? She asked. He nodded. Just ghosts. She smiled knowingly. Then let's go home. They stepped out into the night together, the city humming around them. Ethan looked up at the skyline, lights flickering like quiet stars. Nashville was growing, messy, imperfect just like him. Yet for the first time in years, he felt steady. Behind him, the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded. Ahead, the future waited bright, uncertain, and real. The summer heat came early that year, pressing down on Nashville like a heavy hand. Ethan's days started before dawn and ended long after dark. The hum of air conditioners filling the hours between. Business was steady, and his crew had grown. Linda ran the office now, organized and calm, while Rufus greeted customers with a wagging tail and the soft patience only a rescue dog could offer. The Heat for Heroes program had doubled in size, and donations kept coming in. People called Ethan, the man with the golden wrench. A nickname that embarrassed him but made his mother's old friends proud. Yet success carried its own weight. Some nights he found himself lying awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, wondering when contentment had turned into exhaustion. Linda noticed it too. You need rest, she said one evening, pouring him sweet tea at the kitchen table. Even heroes have to breathe. He smiled weakly. Heroes don't fall asleep at dinner. You're not a hero, she said with a teasing grin. You're a man who forgot how to stop. He laughed, and for a moment the tension melted. But as the radio murmured in the background, a news segment caught his attention. The anchor mentioned Victor Sanders under investigation for fraud and tax evasion. Ethan froze, glass halfway to his lips. Linda turned the volume up. Several investors claim Sanders' development firm misused funds and falsified permits for multiple Nashville properties. Ethan exhaled slowly. Well, he said quietly. Guess some things catch up eventually. Linda looked at him, reading his thoughts. Grace? Probably caught in it, he said. Victor always thought the rules were suggestions. You think she's okay? He hesitated. I think she's learning. They left the radio playing while the sun sank beyond the window. Neither spoke the rest of the evening. A few weeks later, Ethan received an invitation, a city council recognition dinner. The same kind of glittering event he used to dread. But this time he would receive an award for civic service. Linda encouraged him to go. It's not about pride, she said. It's about gratitude. Let people see good still exists. So he agreed. He bought a new suit, the first in years, and polished his old boots until they gleamed. On the night of the dinner, the hall overflowed with light and chatter. The mayor shook his hand, photographers snapped pictures, and someone placed a medal around his neck. Linda beamed, proud and graceful beside him. After the ceremony, they stepped outside for air. The city smelled of summer rain and barbecue smoke from the nearby street fair. Rufus waited patiently in the truck, his head resting on the window ledge. You look happy, Linda said softly. I am, Ethan replied. Feels strange to say it. You earned it. She reached up to straighten his tie. Her touch was simple but grounding. Then a voice cut through the crowd behind them. Ethan. He turned. Grace stood at the edge of the streetlight, wearing a gray dress that looked borrowed. Her hair was pulled back, and for the first time, she seemed small, almost ordinary. Linda's hand dropped from his tie, polite but alert. Grace hesitated before speaking. Can we talk? Ethan looked at Linda, who gave a short nod. I'll give you two a minute, she said gently. Walking toward the truck. Grace waited until Linda was out of earshot. Victor's gone, she said. He disappeared 2 nights ago. They froze our accounts. Reporters are everywhere. Ethan frowned. Why come to me? Because I didn't know where else to go. She took a shaky breath. You were the only good thing I ever had. The words hung heavy. Grace, he said carefully. That's not true. You had choices. You made them. And everyone was wrong. She whispered. You warned me. You told me money doesn't fix emptiness. I didn't listen. Her voice cracked. You were right. He wanted to be angry, but instead he felt something like pity, quiet and hollow. I can't change the past for you, he said. But you can change what you do next. I tried, she said. I got a job at a boutique downtown. But people whisper. They look at me like I'm part of his crimes. You're not him, Ethan said. Then why do I feel like I am? She asked. Tears glinting under the streetlight. Before he could answer, Rufus barked sharply from the truck. Ethan glanced over, noticing a black sedan parked across the street. The door opened, and Victor Sanders stepped out, face red, movements uneven. He was drunk. There you are, Victor slurred. Running to your charity case now? Grace froze. Victor, please. Save it, he snapped, pointing at Ethan. You think you're better than me? You with your tools and your sob stories? Walk away, Victor. Ethan said evenly. It's over. Not until I say it is. Victor lunged forward, grabbing Grace's arm. She yelped, trying to pull free. Ethan stepped between them, voice low but sharp. Let her go. Victor sneered. Or what? You'll fix my air conditioner? Rufus growled from the truck. The tension snapped like wire. Ethan caught Victor's wrist and shoved him back, not hard, just enough to break his grip. Victor stumbled, rage boiling over. You think you're some kind of saint, he spat. You'll be nothing without people like me. I was nothing because of people like you, Ethan said quietly. Grace's purse slipped from her shoulder, spilling onto the pavement. A folded paper fluttered out, a receipt for jewelry. Ethan glanced down. It wasn't hers. The name on it was another woman's. Grace saw it too. Her face went pale. Victor, she whispered, trembling. You bought this for someone else? So what? He snarled. You of all people should understand how deals work. She stepped back, eyes filling with realization. You used me. Just like everyone else. You used yourself, he said cruelly. I just gave you the chance. Ethan's patience snapped. That's enough. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling 911. Victor scoffed. You'd call the cops on me? The man who made you look like a hero? No, Ethan said. I became that on my own. Rufus barked again, sharp and loud. A passing security guard hurried over, hand on his radio. Everything all right here? It will be, Ethan said, eyes still on Victor. The guard stepped between them as blue lights appeared at the corner. Victor's face twisted in fury. You'll regret this, he hissed. But his words drowned under the sirens. The police took statements quickly, efficient and polite. Grace stood silent, shivering despite the heat. When they led Victor away, she didn't look at him. Ethan handed her the jewelry receipt. Might be useful in court. She stared at it, then at him. Why are you helping me? Because someone has to do the right thing, he said simply. Even when no one else will. She nodded. Tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, he said. But you can earn it back. Linda approached quietly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. You okay? He nodded. Let's go home. As they walked to the truck, Grace whispered behind them. Ethan? He turned. Yes? Thank you, she said softly. For proving that good men still exist. He gave a small nod. Just trying to stay one. They drove away as the rain began again, light and cleansing. Rufus settled his head on Ethan's knee. Linda reached across the console, her fingers brushing his. You did the right thing, she said. I know, he replied. But right never feels easy. She smiled faintly. That's how you know it matters. The truck rolled down the quiet street, headlights cutting through the mist, leaving behind the noise, the lights, and the ghosts of everything he'd outgrown. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds like a quiet apology. Ethan sat on the porch steps of his workshop, coffee cooling in his hands, watching Rufus chase the breeze across the yard. The night before still replayed in his mind the sirens, the shouting, Grace's trembling voice. He should have felt peace knowing Victor was in custody. But instead, a strange emptiness lingered. Justice didn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just left silence where anger used to live. Linda stepped outside, still in her robe, holding a second mug. You didn't sleep, she said softly, sitting beside him. Didn't try, he admitted. Too much noise in my head. She passed him the mug. Then try this. It doesn't solve much, but it helps you start again. He smiled faintly. You always know what I need before I do. Maybe that's what faith looks like, she said. Believing someone will still be standing when the storm clears. He turned to her, eyes tired but warm. Storm's been clearing for a while now. I just keep checking for clouds. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Then stop watching the sky, Ethan. Look at what you've built. He did. The workshop stood sturdy, freshly painted. The new banner for Heat for Heroes fluttering in the mild wind. The neighborhood kids had drawn chalk hearts on the sidewalk with Rufus's paw prints in between. He'd built more than a business, he'd built something that breathed decency. That afternoon, he received a call from the local news station asking for an interview about the incident. He politely declined. The story isn't about me, he said. It's about people remembering that doing right still matters. The reporter laughed softly. That's exactly why it's about you. But Ethan still said no. He'd seen what attention could do. It turned genuine kindness into spectacle. He preferred the quiet kind of legacy, the one that lasted after people stopped clapping. Later that week, Linda convinced him to join her for a small community fair at Street Marks. He hadn't been back to the church since the night he'd fixed their old furnace. It felt almost poetic to return after everything that had happened. Families gathered under white tents, children played ring toss, and the smell of grilled corn and lemonade drifted through the warm air. Rufus trotted proudly beside them, wearing a small red bandana that said, "Volunteer." As they walked through the fair, people greeted Ethan, shaking his hand, thanking him for his work. An elderly veteran with an oxygen tank hugged him tightly. "You saved me last winter," the man said. "Without you, I'd have frozen in that apartment." Ethan smiled. "You saved more than me once, sir. Consider it a tie." The man laughed and shuffled away. Linda looked at him, pride glinting in her eyes. "You see? That's the kind of noise you should listen to." He chuckled. "It's better than sirens." As the sun began to set, Ethan excused himself to grab water for Rufus. That's when he saw her. Grace. She stood near the parking lot. Hair unkempt. Clothes plain but clean. There was a fragile steadiness in her now, like someone who'd fallen hard but was learning to walk again. She noticed him, hesitated, then approached slowly. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. "You're not," he replied, though part of him wished she'd stayed away. "How've you been?" "Sober," she said. "Broke. But alive." He nodded. "That's a start." "Victor made bail," she added. "But he's under house arrest. They found more evidence." "He's finished." Ethan's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Good." Grace looked around the fair, watching families laugh, children chasing each other. "I started volunteering at a shelter," she said quietly. "I used the card you gave me that night." He met her eyes, surprised. "You actually went?" "I did. They gave me a job helping with donations. It's not much. But it's honest." She smiled faintly. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Being honest." "Strange in a good way," he said. She nodded, then looked down. "I saw your story on the news. They called you a hometown hero." He laughed. "Don't believe everything you hear." "No," she said. "But I believe that part." There was silence, then she whispered. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Not just for what I did, but for not seeing who you really were." He took a breath. "Grace, the past doesn't owe us anything. It just teaches us what not to repeat." "Does it ever stop haunting you?" she asked. "It can," he said. "If you stop giving it a key to the front door." She smiled through her tears. "You always had a way with words." "No," he said. "Just learned them the hard way." Linda appeared a few moments later, carrying 2 lemonades. She noticed Grace and hesitated, then offered one of the cups to her. "It's a hot day," Linda said gently. "No one deserves to stand in the heat alone." Grace blinked, accepting it. "Thank you." The 3 stood quietly, the fair's laughter echoing faintly behind them. Grace finally said, "You're lucky, Ethan." He shook his head. "No, I'm blessed." She nodded. "That's the better word." When she walked away, Rufus barked once, as if saying goodbye. Linda turned to him, a teasing smile touching her lips. "You have a habit of rescuing more than just furnaces, you know." He chuckled. "Maybe I just like fixing things that are worth saving." She leaned against his shoulder. "And how do you decide what's worth saving?" "If it still has heart," he said. "That's enough." Later that evening, after the fair ended, Ethan and Linda drove home. The windows were down, warm air rushing in, country music humming softly from the radio. Rufus snored in the back seat, paws twitching in dreams. Linda looked at Ethan and said, "You never told me what your father was like." He smiled. Quiet. Stubborn. Believed decency was its own reward. Sounds familiar. He laughed. He used to tell me there are two kinds of people, those who fix things and those who pretend they don't see the cracks. I guess I picked my side. She reached for his hand, fingers intertwining with his. He'd be proud. I hope so. The road stretched ahead, dark but peaceful. When they reached home, Ethan parked the truck and sat for a moment, watching the porch light flicker on automatically. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think life was about what you have. But maybe it's about what you keep, your word, your dignity, your kindness." Linda squeezed his hand. "And you've kept all three." He looked at her, really looked, and felt something quiet settle in his chest. A peace that didn't need proof. As they stepped out, the night air smelled of honeysuckle and cut grass. Rufus ran ahead to the porch, tail wagging, as if declaring the day officially over. Ethan followed, pausing to look back at the horizon. Somewhere out there, Grace was starting over. Victor was facing justice. And he was finally living the life he'd almost given up on. Maybe this is what grace really means, he thought. Not forgiveness, but the courage to move forward without bitterness. He turned toward Linda, who was unlocking the door, her laughter floating through the night. Rufus barked once, impatient for dinner. Ethan smiled. "Coming, boy," he called. "We've earned a good meal." Inside, the light spilled warmly across the floor, touching everything that had once been broken and was now whole again. The next morning dawned soft and golden, the kind of Tennessee morning that made the world feel washed clean. Birds fluttered on the fence line, and the hum of cicadas rose with the warming air. Ethan woke early, as he always did. But this time, there was no weight in his chest, no ghosts from the past waiting in the quiet. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Linda, and brewed coffee in the small kitchen. The workshop across the yard gleamed under the sunrise, its new sign catching the light. Miller Climate Services. "We fix air, but we keep hearts warm." It had been Linda's idea to paint that phrase, and at first he'd laughed, calling it too sentimental. But now, reading it through the window, he realized it was true. That was what his life had become, fixing what others thought beyond repair. Rufus padded in, tail thumping, and nudged his knee for breakfast. Ethan smiled. "You're more punctual than most men I've hired." The dog barked once, satisfied, then curled up beside the table while Ethan sipped his coffee and let the peace sink in. Around mid-morning, a knock echoed on the front door. Linda appeared, tying her hair up. "Expecting someone?" she asked. "Not unless someone's heater broke early," he said. When he opened the door, a familiar voice greeted him. "Morning, Ethan." It was Grace. She stood on the porch dressed neatly in jeans and a plain blouse, holding a small envelope. Her face looked different, less painted, more real. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said. "It's fine," he replied cautiously. "You look better." "Trying," she said, managing a small smile. "I wanted to bring you something." She handed him the envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Nashville Chronicle. The headline read, "Sanders convicted. Victims speak on justice and closure." Below it was a short interview with Grace, quoting her testimony. "You went through with it," he said. "Yeah." She nodded. "The DA asked me to testify about the false accounts. I almost didn't. But I remembered what you said, that the past only haunts you if you keep leaving the door open." "That's brave," he said sincerely. "It's right," she corrected. "I learned that from you." She looked past him toward the yard where Rufus lay in the grass, tail twitching lazily. "He's still with you," she said softly. "Loyal as ever." "He doesn't quit on the people he trusts," Ethan replied. Grace's eyes glistened. "You were that for me once. I just didn't know it." He didn't answer, but the silence between them wasn't bitter anymore, just quiet acceptance. She stepped back toward the porch steps. "I'm leaving town," she said. "There's a nonprofit in Knoxville that helps women restart after bad situations. They offered me a spot. I think it's time." "That sounds good," he said. "Fresh start." "It feels strange," she admitted. "Not chasing something shiny for once. Sometimes the dull things last longer," he said. She smiled. "I guess we'll see." They stood there for a long second, the past gently folding itself into memory. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said. "Goodbye, Grace." When she turned to walk away, Rufus barked once low, friendly, Final. Later that day, Ethan and Linda drove to the community center for the launch of the new Heat for Heroes Fund. The city had granted them additional resources, and several local businesses had signed on as sponsors. It was the kind of event Ethan once avoided: ribbons, speeches, applause, but today it didn't feel like vanity. It felt like closure. The hall buzzed with chatter as volunteers arranged tables of refreshments. Coffee, cornbread, sweet tea. A local band tuned their guitars in the corner, strumming a slow country rhythm. When Ethan stepped onto the small stage, people clapped, not out of spectacle but recognition. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, adjusting the microphone. "But I'll say this: every broken air conditioner I've ever fixed taught me the same thing. If you keep applying the right kind of care, even the coldest system can start working again." Turns out, people aren't much different. The crowd chuckled softly. He continued. "This program started because someone once told me you can't fix the world. Maybe not. But you can fix a small piece of it, and sometimes that's enough." The applause was warm, real. Linda joined him on stage to announce the new outreach projects. When the ceremony ended, they stood side by side watching families sign up for volunteer shifts. "You spoke like a preacher," she teased. "If I ever start preaching, drag me back to the workshop." "Deal," she laughed. They stayed late, helping clean up. As the last guests left, an older man approached Mr. Henry, walking slower now but still with that familiar spark. "You remember me, son?" he asked. "Wouldn't forget you," Ethan said, shaking his hand. "You told me not to lose my decency." Mr. Henry grinned. "Looks like you didn't. World could use more like you." "I just followed your advice," Ethan said. "Guess we're even." "No, son," the old man replied. "You paid it forward. That's worth more." Ethan watched him leave, the old man's steps steady under the fading light, and felt something like pride bloom deep in his chest, not the loud kind, but the quiet one that stays. That night, after dinner, he and Linda sat on the porch swing, Rufus asleep between them. Fireflies blinked across the yard, tiny embers floating in the dusk. The sound of crickets and distant church bells filled the air. Linda leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever miss who you used to be?" she asked. He thought about it. "Sometimes," he said. "But only because I didn't know how far I could go. Pain taught me patience. Loss taught me how to value what stays." She smiled. "And what stays?" "Character," he said simply. "When money fades, character remains. That's the only thing no one can steal." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the porch light. "That sounds like something your father would have said." "Maybe he's still teaching," Ethan murmured. "Through me." They sat in silence for a while, watching Rufus twitch in his sleep, chasing dream rabbits. The night smelled like earth and rain, like endings that had found their peace. Somewhere down the road, a truck engine hummed, a reminder that work would start again tomorrow. Life didn't pause for happy endings, it just gave you gentler days to live them. As they prepared to go inside, Linda reached out and traced the edge of the new sign hanging by the door. "You know," she said, "every time I see that, it feels like a prayer." Ethan followed her gaze. "We fix air, but we keep hearts warm." He nodded. "Then let's keep praying." They turned off the porch light. Inside, the home glowed softly, golden and calm. In the corner, Ethan's old wallet lay open on the counter. Tucked inside was the faded receipt for a small engagement ring, the one he'd once thought defined his worth. Now it was just a reminder of the lesson that had shaped him. He picked it up, folded it gently, and placed it in a small wooden box beside the window. Not to forget, but to honor. The past no longer hurt, it had simply done its job. Outside, the wind carried the sound of church chimes through the quiet streets of Nashville, and somewhere in that melody, Ethan heard his father's voice. "There's right, and there's easy. You don't get both." He smiled, locking the door, feeling the truth of it settle deep in his bones. Tomorrow would bring new work, new faces, new chances to do what was right. But tonight, the world was still. And for once, that was enough.